Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. This is my monthly office hours. I'm looking forward to having you join me for today. Only have a couple little things to kind of cover that I want to run through really quick. At the beginning, I have not gotten any questions ahead of time submitted from anyone. So if you have a question, we have ample time to answer any questions, or just to talk about stuff that anything that you want to talk about. So this is, before we kind of really dive into it, I thought I'd start with a little bit of an introduction. But before I do that, if you wouldn't mind, wherever you are connecting, wherever you're joining me, if you're inside of the Voitanos Learn community, if you wouldn't mind dropping a message in the chat to say that you can both see and hear me, I would greatly appreciate it. Just lets me know that all the connections and everything is working just fine. Also, anybody who's tuning in from YouTube Live, from Facebook Live, or from LinkedIn Live, any of those, drop it in as well. So Sabby, I see you're tuning in from YouTube. So thank you very much, letting me know that you say it's set up and great. You can see and hear. So that's awesome. I appreciate that. Bill over in Voitanos Learn, thank you very much as well. Alex, good to see you as well. Let me kind of zoom in my screen here a little bit so I can make it easier for me to see these chat messages that are coming up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I don't expect a huge audience today. We do have, of course, when I scheduled this, I didn't pay attention to the calendar as closely as I probably could have. Usually I do, well, before I get there, come right back. So let me start off with just introducing myself. In case we haven't met, you know who I am, first time tuning in, or you're watching this as a recording, and you don't know who I am. Let me just go and get this out of the way. My name is Andrew Connell. I like to do these office hours once a month, generally, and it's all for full stack developers, Microsoft 365 developers. I guess you could also say like pro code, you could say code first. Basically, if you're thinking like TypeScript or .NET or JavaScript, really anything in terms of like development, and not like low code, no code stuff, I like to just do one of these office hours once a month, and cover the latest and greatest things that have been going on, that are newsworthy or that are coming up that I think you should be aware of. But I also carve out a lot of time here just to kind of like an AMA, where I try to leave at least half the time that I have set aside for this, to where we can do I can answer your questions. My name is Andrew Connell. I've been doing this for the SharePoint development world. I started SharePoint development, or actually started with something called Content Management Server, Microsoft Content Management Server, way back in the day, back about 22, 23 years ago. Then moved into SharePoint development, and since then I've kind of lived in the SharePoint development world, now primarily like cloud first. So Microsoft 365, SharePoint Online, Teams, SharePoint Embedded, M365 Copilot, custom agents for M365 Copilot, and then anything that helps me facilitate and support those different projects that I'm working on, or that I'm learning and that I'm teaching and I'm writing stuff about. So that would involve, Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Azure, you name it. I mean, just anything that's going to apply to any of those things. I have a company called Voitanos. It's where it's my primary business, or my primary source of income, where I focus on building courses and doing live workshops, and doing a little bit of, I call it private coaching, but really what it is like, think of it more like mentorship kind of a thing, or a fractional subject matter expert. So that's more of a private thing, but where a company can hire me for on a retainer model for a block of hours, and then we just jump on the phone and we just talk through your problem. I can help research it. I can help connect you with the right people. Yeah, it's a lot of. I really enjoy doing that. Is I get to know what your issue is and kind of work through it. So got a couple clients I'm working with right now. Got space for one or two more. So if you're interested, just reach out. You can learn more about that at the Voitanos website, which is go under Solutions for Companies, or individuals, doesn't really matter, but it's under the Solution for Companies bit. I also have a podcast that I publish every other Wednesday, bi-weekly, called Code Deploy Go Live. And it's really everything that I focus on that you heard me talk about so far. I focus on that as well. I got to do it with a co-host of mine, good friend of mine, Julie Turner, who's also similar background to me. Been doing this similarly about the same time, where we just get together and we talk about the latest and greatest stuff. So our last episode that was released last Wednesday was our predictions and wishes for 2026 on what we think is going to happen and what we hope is going to happen. I've been an MVP for over 21 years, 22 years, I think. And I have a bi-weekly newsletter as well. So bi-weekly podcast, bi-weekly newsletter that come out every other week. So that bi-weekly newsletter is at the bottom there where you see full stack devs, M365 playbook. And that's where I talk about things like, the same kind of stuff. So one of the things I like to do with that is I focus on like writing something that's a bit of like some insight or something, a high value piece of content that I've been working on. But then the rest of it is like a roll up of a bunch of recent news from Microsoft, or really just the community or the ecosystem of things that I think a Microsoft 365 developer should be aware of. So if you've been doing this, you know that there's a lot coming at us. There's a lot of news coming at us all the time, fast and furious. And this just gives me an opportunity to kind of like distill it down and kind of share it with you. So instead of you having to stay on top of it, that's what I can do. So you can get a newsletter delivered straight to your inbox where I cover these different things. All right. Okay. So that's the gist of what we're doing. I don't expect to see a lot of people today. As I was saying earlier, I do these, I started to say this earlier, but generally what I like to do at these office hours is that, I schedule them once a month, usually on the third Tuesday of the month, which would fall on tomorrow, but I'm in the middle of teaching a live workshop. I guess anybody can register for it, but it is a live workshop on the SharePoint framework right now. And we did 3 days last week and we're doing 3 days this week. And the schedule falls in line with this exact same time tomorrow when I normally would do my office hours. And so I had to reschedule it, and it was either push it back a week or move it up a day. I couldn't push it up a week. I couldn't go up a week because I was teaching the same workshop last week. So it was either move it to today, which I did, or move it to next week. And I just thought it'd be, since we didn't do one in December, I thought it'd be too far to try and push it yet another week. But of course, I didn't look at the calendars closely, and today is a federal holiday in the United States. It's Martin Luther King Day, or MLK Day, who is, if you're not familiar, is a civil rights activist, peaceful civil rights activist who was assassinated, lost him way too early. And so it's a day of observance and honoring him. So a lot of places, it's like a bank holiday. A lot of places are closed. Schools are out today in the United States. So I don't expect a lot of people from the United States are going to be tuning in because technically for a lot of businesses, it's a day off. So I don't expect a lot of people in the United States joining us. So I already recognize two names. I can't tell exactly how many people are joining right now when I see this, but I can tell. Let's see. Let me just take a quick peek here, as I can see a little bit more on Voitanos Learn. Okay, so I can't exactly tell how many people I have here in the combined of where this is being streamed. But of the people that I've seen, I recognize a lot of names that are outside the United States. So Canada, Europe, Asia. So if I'm, I guess it's going to be, I would expect a low attendance here. So I wouldn't mind, actually, it would be kind of nice. I use a service that I stream it to Voitanos Learn myself. And then I use a third-party service that will simulcast it to a bunch of other services like Facebook, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube Live. But I can't see how many people are connected on all the different platforms. So I'd be really curious, though, if you wouldn't mind just chime in, just kind of like chime in and tell me, like, where are you tuning in from, right? Where are you tuning in from well, just where are you tuning in from? I'd be curious to see that, see how many people are here between the different platforms and stuff. So I'm in Florida in the United States, a place called St. John's, Florida, where it is actually very cold. I just finished doing a 15-mile run this morning and had to leave early when it was still below freezing. Yes, it does get below freezing here in the in Florida. So it was 29 degrees Fahrenheit when I went out this morning, and took about an hour and a half before the sun was up. So anyway, I'm still cold to the core. Long hot shower, but still cold to the core, and got my coffee to try and help keep me going. Sorry, not keep me going, to keep me, like, to warm me up. So if you got a question, what I'd love to do, please go ahead and put your questions, and others, maybe from Connecticut, awesome. So if you would like post your question or put your question in the chat, whichever platform you're in, I can see them all. Because I will have plenty of time for questions at the end, and we may even spur some questions with this as well. In fact, I actually recognize one of the names. Hello, Donna, who's in my SharePoint Framework workshop right now. All right. So generally, what I like to do is I like to go over like the three main developer workloads these days when it comes to Microsoft 365. That falls into SharePoint Framework, falls into building custom apps and solutions for Microsoft Teams. I have a workshop coming up on that in February, if you're interested to take a look. On my website, just go to voitanos.io. And I also have also around Microsoft 365 Copilot. Now, one of the, I guess, nice things, but unfortunate today that we have is that we don't have a lot of news. I don't have a whole lot of news because after Thanksgiving in the United States, Microsoft kind of like shuts down. Partly because of, like, Thanksgiving is a huge holiday in the United States, and then a lot of people end up taking time off and vacation, personal time off at the end of the year, which they did. A lot of people ended up doing that at Microsoft yet again. They always do it. And then in the start of the year, like around New Year's or at the first few weeks of January, there's not a whole lot of news either that comes out. So there's not a whole lot of stuff to share. And I've got a couple things related to like SharePoint and SharePoint Framework to talk about, but I don't have anything around Teams, and I don't have anything developer around Copilot. I will call out one thing. I saw this over the weekend, talk about like getting under my skin, that Microsoft kind of announced, and you may see it. I don't see it yet in my tenant, but they have added a try Claude button or link in Microsoft 365 Copilot. I noticed it last night, actually, on Sunday evening. A friend of mine tipped me to it. He was surprised he saw it. And I just had this big rant about it because I don't know. It's a little frustrating to me because you're not actually getting Claude. You're not actually playing with Claude. What you're really doing is you have the ability to use the different models that Claude uses. And they even say that in the support document to learn more about it, which is a little frustrating because, I mean, they're being disingenuous. They're misleading. Claude is so much more than just a couple models. It's kind of like saying, which is weird about it to me, because when like GPT-5 came out, when Microsoft or GPT-4 came out, first we were using GPT 3.5, and then we were using GPT-4 and GPT-4o mini, and now we're using GPT-5. When OpenAI would come out with new models, Microsoft would be like, hey, try GPT-5 or try this or try that, different models that you could try out. They get it right on that one, right? They don't say try ChatGPT, because that's not what you're getting. ChatGPT is an app. Like think like an AI chatbot, right? It is an app, right? Or a collection of a couple different apps. and it uses OpenAI's models. Microsoft 365, they don't have their own large language models, right? Instead, what they do is, instead of being in the model development or training business, they provide the compute power via Azure for companies that need to do a lot of training on their with new models like OpenAI or Anthropic. They can use the Microsoft infrastructure in Microsoft Azure to do all of that compute. They instead have their own app or apps. I guess they have a ton of them, or 100 of them, that they brand as Copilot. So things like Microsoft 365 Copilot, that is a chatbot. That is an AI-based chatbot, and it uses a model under the covers. So like it uses the Chat GPT, sorry, it uses the what's it called? GPT-5, I think, is the default model it's using today. That's what Copilot uses. When you look at what Anthropic, who is the maker of Claude, when you look at what Anthropic does, so like the big players in this space for models, I mean, there's lots of them, but you've got, I would say like the big three that usually come to people's mind are, or four, I guess, is Meta, Google, Meta, like Facebook, Google, and like the two really big ones you see today that are all over the place are OpenAI and Anthropic. And of course, there's lots of other ones like Minstrel and a couple other ones as well. Those are the big, DeepSeek. Those are the big, I guess DeepSeek is actually a model. I'm not sure what the company's name is, but there's a lot of different options there. When Microsoft says try Claude, they're implying the same thing. Like it's like, hey, we're gonna, instead of using Copilot with GPT-5, you can use Copilot with ChatGPT, which is not what Microsoft does. So I don't understand why they say Copilot with a link saying try Claude. You're not using Claude. Claude is it's a whole platform, right? It's a whole chatbot model, or it's a whole chatbot. You're really using Anthropic's models, which are the same models that ChatGPT uses, just like, sorry, the same models that Claude uses, just like ChatGPT by OpenAI uses OpenAI's models, GPT-5, GPT-4, whatever. Claude, made by Anthropic, uses one of the models that we have that Anthropic has created, things like Opus, Sonnet, or Haiku. Those are the three big models that they have. There's a couple other ones too, like Whisper and stuff, but those are their three big models. When Microsoft says, "Hey, try Claude," they're being disingenuous, because Claude is so much more. The orchestrator that it has, it's got skills, whole concept with skills. It's agent framework. It's got like embedded memory that follows you like around. So between your different conversations, it learns about you over time. And so it can apply when you ask questions. It's almost like a very personalized experience for you. So like for me, I was doing some stuff over the weekend, messing with my home automation stuff, and it knew what network stuff I had in my house. It knew that I like to have a lot of my stuff is done using Unify devices. It knows I use a Home Assistant. It knows the different Home Assistant add-ons and integrations that I've installed with it. And it knew that. So when I went to go ask a question, it's like, well, because you're using this, you actually don't need to install it again. You already have it. So you can go use, like it's called a mushroom card, which is a UI framework of a bunch of different UI components that we have inside of Home Assistant, the automation thing I use. Anyway, Microsoft knows this too. And the part that's disingenuous about it is that when you go look at the support article that they published last night, they even said that when you try Claude, you get access to Claude's models, presumably Opus and Sonnet. Doesn't say what versions you get. That's a big difference. But also, this only applies to the researcher agent in M365 Copilot. So I guess I could have waited until we got to the Copilot stuff, but that's the one thing I was just going to cover there. It was a little rant that I wanted to go on real quick. All right, let's talk about some of the SharePoint stuff first. Savvy, I see your question there. I will definitely address it. So let's talk a little bit here about, actually, I want to do one thing on Microsoft 365. It's really bigger than just SharePoint, but it really affects SharePoint and SharePoint Framework people. So later this year, on April 2nd, there are a bunch of things with Microsoft 365 specifically related to SharePoint that are all going to retire. And when I say retire, I don't mean deprecate. I mean like they'll be gone. So for example, SharePoint 2013 workflows, that service will be completely shut off. Really, there's like between 3 of these, the 2 that you see on this side, and then the first one in this list. What's really happening here is this Azure, they're all kind of intertwined. So Azure ACS, when Azure ACS is shut down, which has been, Azure shut this down a long time ago, but they kept it running for Microsoft 365. This was the like predecessor for app-based identity that we used to have in SharePoint going back to 2013. It is no longer used. Instead, we use Intra for all this stuff. But they kept it running for M365 and specifically for SharePoint. So ACS is fully being shut down and decommissioned for M365 on April the 2nd. All of these have been deprecated, and these announcements have been out for, I think, 2 years now, at least well over a year and a half. I believe it all came out in like November-ish. They were kind of announced like scattered throughout the second half of 2024. November is the date that I see is like the big thing for it, but I think it came out way before that. When ACS goes away, that takes away the entire identity model that we had for the SharePoint add-in model. And so when ACS goes away, the add-in model goes away. Microsoft has been wanting to get rid of the add-in model for a while. It was not very popular. It requires a bunch of services and infrastructure to run the add-in model, but they couldn't get rid of it because a lot of people there were enough people that were using it, but also they couldn't get rid of it because it is also how our SharePoint 2013 workflows, including workflows that you would create and work and use, you would create with SharePoint Designer 2013. Those when we would save those and deploy those were being effectively, they were using ACS and the add-in model for all of those to run. So all these things are kind of intertwined. When the retirement date was announced for one of them, it kind of affected all the other ones. When like add-in model was announced, well, that was going to kill off workflows. When workflows was announced as being deprecated, that had other impacts as well. Ultimately, when Azure ACS was announced as being as pending retirement, that knocked out all 3 of them. So they're just like, you've got 2 years to get off this stuff. For the last year, I think it was, if you create a new M365 tenant, all 3 of those services were not turned on. So these were, and then I think in June of last year of 2025 or July, they disabled the ability to add any new add-ins, deploy any new add-ins to the SharePoint store. So the only way then you've been able to use add-ins for the last year is if you had a tenant that was created prior to mid 2024, and you had either acquired from the store an add-in prior to mid 2024, and or you had been creating add-ins and deploying them, and you could still create an add-in today and deploy it, but it's not gonna work on April the 2nd. So the 4th thing that they've announced the retirement of, and again, they announced this a while back, is related to the SharePoint framework. They retired something called isolated web, or they deprecated, and it will be retired on April the 2nd, something called isolated web parts. So what isolated web parts are, and I recognize 1 or 2 names of people who are in my SharePoint framework workshop right now, because we talked a little bit about this last week, but I didn't go into much depth on it. Frankly, because we didn't have, it was outside of scope. But what isolated web parts are, when a web part is added to a page, what SharePoint Online does is it adds a div to the page where the web part's going to get rendered. And then when our web part runs, when SharePoint Online loads SharePoint Framework's runtime, when it loads our web part, which is a JavaScript file, and it executes it, we have the opportunity to write HTML to the inner HTML property on that div. We can do that if we're using React, because we just point to the div and say, hey, React, render that inside of that div. Render this React component inside of that div. Or we do it just with HTML or jQuery, which, well, never mind. We'd write straight to the inner HTML property on that same div. When it came to like security, so when it came to things like getting an access token from SharePoint Online and thus intra, so if our SharePoint Framework web part was going to use Microsoft Graph, or if it was going to talk to another intra ID secured endpoint, when our SharePoint Framework component would call SharePoint Online and say, hey, I need an access token, SharePoint Online had no idea to know what the request came from. It knows it originated from SharePoint Online. It knows it originated from something running in the client, in the browser, but it doesn't know what requested that. So just because our web part needed the mail.read permission, it doesn't know that somebody didn't open up the browser tools and look from the command prompt or from the console, make the request. So what they ended up doing so what Microsoft did is they introduced a new service called the isolated web parts. And what this did, this kind of worked the same way that if you remember, for those of you who've been doing this for a long time, if you think back to the SharePoint add-in model, we actually had 3 different ways we could do an add-in. We had provider hosted and SharePoint hosted. Those are the 2 that are still there today, and they're going to go away soon, or they're going to go away on April the 2nd. We also had another way of doing this called auto-hosted. And what auto-hosted did was, if we gave our add-in to Microsoft, it would spin up a separate domain. So it would be like some sort of a hash.something.sharepoint.com, but it would be some sort of a domain, and that's where my app ran. Isolated web parts do the same thing. What it does is it would load our web part on a page that was running on a unique domain to that web part that Microsoft would create on the fly, so unique DNS entry. But it would load the web part not in a div, but it would load it in an iframe. So when that web part would make the request to say, hey, I need an access token, SharePoint Online can say, I know that this came from SharePoint Online, but specifically, I know exactly what called it because it came from a very specific domain. Whereas the rest of the requests all come from just something.sharepoint.com. When we do it with an isolated web part will ends up making the request from some hash, some value.sharepoint.com. And it's like, I know that that's Andrew's web part, and that can be associated with its own intra ID, not using the same one that SharePoint Online has it. So I could have unique permissions just to that web part or that SharePoint Framework component, that package that would be able to get those permissions. Microsoft said, nope, sorry. 2 years ago, they said, we're deprecating this, it's going away. Big disappointment for me, because that's something I think a lot of customers don't realize, what the impact is of granting a permission to SharePoint Online. So it's disappointing, but it is what it is. There's other ways you can get around it, which we can get into if you're interested, but all of those things, they're all going away by April the 2nd, and there is no way to get an extension. These have been out there for a long time, all right? I guess another one too, that's not a retirement, but one to keep an eye on, that you should make sure you check your projects, is something called content security policy. That is rolling out, I think that's out right now, but it is not being enforced. It's just logging. So content security policy is the concept of, I can configure a website that when the browser requests a website as the server, I can tell the browser what JavaScript files and other things like CSS or images or whatever, what things can be loaded on the page. So I could say like, only allow these things, only allow script files from SharePoint.com. So only allow SPFx solutions that are deployed to SharePoint Online, and everything is in the is deployed to the site when I install it. But if I have like an external reference, like if I add jQuery to my project, and jQuery, I'm using the CDN version of jQuery or the CDN implementation of jQuery and not putting jQuery in my bundle. The good thing is my bundle is a lot smaller, but it's coming from an external CDN, so it could also be cached in the browser. Well, I guess my web part could too, but jQuery is much more popular than my web part is. So anyway, that's a performance optimization thing. Well, when the content security policy, when it rolls out and is being enforced, it would block the request to that jQuery library because that CDN has not been whitelisted in the SharePoint Admin Center as a list called the Trusted Script Sources. There's a way that you can have your project include it, and there's also a way that you can include the domain so that when somebody installs it, it will add that domain as being whitelisted or allowed to be loaded. But you can also manually go through and add stuff. This is considered a security thing. I'm kind of surprised that SharePoint Online hasn't had this yet, especially with all the secure first initiative that Microsoft has been rolling out over the last 2 years. What this basically does is it allows admins to say, you can't load JavaScript files from outside of our intranet unless we explicitly whitelist that in. So that's just how it works. It is currently rolled out right now. It is only logging it, but it is not enforcing it. When the enforcement starts, which is, I believe, at the beginning of April, I think it's April 2nd as well. When you try and load a JavaScript file from an external CDN, or dynamically, or however you're doing it, SharePoint will block the request. It will tell the browser, don't download it, block the request. And so your web part could break, and it will log something both in the console, and it will also log something in Purview, so that you can see a list of what policies were rejected. There is a way, using a PowerShell commandlet, you'll be able to delay the enforcement for 3 months. But that is absolutely coming, and there's no way to get around that. So you need to look at your solutions. There's ways to test it today, to test a solution, to say hey, let me see what happens if it actually was being enforced right now. Let's make sure my stuff works. So there's a way to do that. I've got an article on most of the stuff. I need to make a couple updates to it for some changes they've recently announced. But if you're not familiar with that, I'm happy to go into that a little bit more in depth. So just ask a question in the chat about that. Okay, so those are those two things. I do see a question from Sabby about the collaboration summit. I'm happy to do that in just a minute. And Casper, you said that sounds like something where one part of the org is tripping a lot of sites. I mean, not really. I mean, maybe. I think that the thing that's going to be a little, they've announced it a couple times in the admin center, but the thing that's going to be a little interesting to see how this plays out is that unless you've noticed it in the admin center, I bet there's a pretty good chance that on April the 2nd, we're going to see a lot of things break that people were not really paying attention to. Who's looking at stuff in the console on a day-to-day basis, just browsing through your intranet site, especially if you've got tens of thousands of sites? Nobody. And then how many of you are going through Purview and looking for this one obscure finding or report thing that's not showing as an error, it's just reporting it? And I doubt many people are. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to cover is, let's talk about SharePoint Framework. So in my last office hours back in December, I talked about the upcoming release of the SharePoint framework, which came out in December. Sorry, my last office hours was in November. And then in early December, I did a webinar on this same topic. So the SharePoint framework, the latest release of it is 1.22, well, .1. There was 1.22.0, and now there's also .1. Both of them came out in December. And what this was a major, the biggest change to the SharePoint framework since it was released. And that was primarily, it's just a change from the tool chain, a change to the tool chain, in that they got rid of gulp and they replaced it with a tool called heft. So if you're not familiar with this, I've got a link here on the slide that will take you to my article on this. But you can also go back and watch my November office hours from 2025, that wherever you're looking for, it's listed on the Voitanos website. So just go to voitanos.io, go to free resources, go to webinars, and just look at the list. And it's from just the November one. But what's probably more interesting to you is I did a deep dive on this from a session that I did at a conference in Ireland back in December. I did a webinar in December on this same topic that is also available on my website that you can go take a look at. So I showed not only like, hey, what is the change and how is it going to impact me? And then I also showed, here's all the different ways you can extend your tool chain, how we used to do it, and here's how you do it in the new way. So I went through all that stuff. So that's a great place where you can go through and learn more about it. The links on that page are going to take you to, there's additional like links on that page for like learn more. That'll take you to more stuff that I've written about this. So got a lot more coming about it too. Casper's going back. So like if you had an internet in a box or some home build stuff, April the 2nd is going to be a busy day. It could be a bad day for you. Yeah, you might want to call home and say, I might not be home for dinner. All right, so what's coming? What's coming with the SharePoint framework? So the next release, they used to say February, they used to say February. Now they're saying February, March. So I'm going to say Q1 is 1.23. And so with this, they are doing a couple things. So today we use a Yeoman generator for creating SPFx projects. That is going to change. They have talked about a new open source SharePoint framework command line interface tool that we will use to create our projects and getting rid of Yeoman. I don't have any issues with that because Yeoman is old. A lot of people don't use it anymore. But then again, I haven't seen what they're doing. So we'll see how that works out. One of the nice things that's supposed to be with this is that there's supposed to be a way for us to create our own templates and have the CLI use our templates instead of theirs. So we can finally have a React-based web part that uses a functional component and not a class component. Hopefully they do that. Hopefully we don't have to build our own template, but if they don't do it, we can do our own. We'll see more about that. They say they're going to open source the Yeoman templates. I asked about this. I was like, if the CLI is supposed to replace the Yeoman templates, then why are you going to open source the Yeoman templates? And they're like, and I think it's basically saying the CLI is open source and the templates that the CLI uses, it is also going to be open source. So you can play with it as well. So a couple different ways. Oh yeah, sorry, Don, I see you just posted your message on the YouTube feed. I was going to, I saw you in the Voitanos Learn. I was going to call that out in just a minute. All right, so that's one. Another thing is there have some improvements coming to command set extensions. So being able to group, put like buttons in a group, which we can't do today. And then they're also doing, they're calling it new and edit panel overrides. So if you're used to using like a form customizer extension, they're apparently going to introduce a way for us to not just take over the entire page with our custom form, but we'll have the ability to go through and to make changes to the one that shows up on the, actually for you guys, on the right side panel. All right. So 2 different ways of doing it. Oh, sorry, I didn't even call it out. So Don put something in the chat, the way that you can enforce CSP to test if it, like, to see how your application will behave. So today, like I said, it's just in reporting mode. If you put a value on the query string, if you put CSP equals enforce, then it'll basically treat it like it's going to be on-prem. Let's see. So I'll come back to that in a sec, Donna. I didn't see you post anything to the YouTube feed, Donna. That's okay. So we're fine. I'll come back to your question in just a bit. So that's another thing that's supposed to be coming, and then another thing that's supposed to be coming, and this is not going to be related to really any version of the SharePoint framework. They just kind of lop it in, and we've only got a few days left for it. We've got like 10 days left, so I'm waiting to see this. I still haven't seen this. There's a new debugging toolbar coming to the SharePoint framework that we will have access to do, that we have access for, to use. And the idea behind this is going to ultimately get rid of the hosted workbench in our SharePoint Online sites. So we will be using real SharePoint pages to test our web parts the same way we do with extensions. So the hosted workbench will go away. I don't think that's a bad or a good thing. It's just a thing. The debugging toolbar, they say it's going to be a lot more useful for us in a way for us to give feedback straight from the toolbar. We'll see. I'm not sure. So, and then the next update that's coming in Q2 is they just say navigation customizers. So the idea with this, we actually had, this is kind of funny. This is like, let's bring back something we used to be able to do in the old SharePoint days. They want to give us a way to where we can change the data source for one of the navigation elements that we have in SharePoint. So I'm making this up because I haven't seen this yet, okay? And they haven't shared much with it. But think like the navigation on the left-hand side of the page for the quick launch, or the quick launch and then left-hand navigation. It's based on like it renders out data that it gets from SharePoint Online. Apparently, there's going to be a way for us to give it its own like data source and tell it, hey, here's how I want you to return the data. Is that the only place we're going to be able to do it? Are there going to be other places we can do it? I don't know. So they haven't shared anything with that, but that's the stuff they're working on. And then the other part of the thing they said recently too, which is part of this roadmap link that you see here. This takes you to the December roadmap that they published. They just basically say like, expect a bunch of AI in SharePoint and SharePoint Framework, right? But there's no details around that. So we have to wait and see what's up with that. Okay, so now good news is that we can just kind of riff and do Q&A for the rest of the time. So I want to go back. I'm going to go back and answer questions like in the order that they came up. I do want to go back. Let me find one article really quick. There it is. Because a while back, Sabi asked, his first question said, can you please talk a little about your planned sessions content at the Collaboration Summit 2026? So I am going to be, actually, let me do this. Pull this over here. Let's do like this. Cool. All right. So I'm going to be at the European Collaboration Summit 2026. It's a conference that's in Cologne, Germany. Well, that's how in America we pronounce it. I think I was told it's Cologne is how you pronounce it in Europe. So try and do it the right way, the European way, in May of 2026. And there I'm doing I think I'm doing two things. I'm doing a couple things. Just two, let me see. Oh, shoot. They're not all listed there. Let me pull out my notes because I do have them here. I need to go update that page because I do know what things I'm doing. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. Speak at a bunch of conferences and I forget what sessions I'm doing at which place. ECS. Yes. So I'm doing 3 things at ECS. So the first thing I'm doing is a full day workshop. I'm doing this with a good friend of mine, Mark Rackley. It is the same workshop that we did at the European SharePoint conference in Dublin in December. So what this is basically Mark and I think like we kind of go back and forth with this. Sorry, we don't go back and forth. We know what we're doing. We talk about, I want to build an agent and I want to extend Microsoft 365 Copilot. What are my options? And you have a couple options. What Mark and I go over is Mark shows, first of all, how do you choose your different options? So we go over SharePoint agents, agent builder, using Copilot Studio, or using Visual Studio Code, using the Agents Toolkit, the ATK, for developers. So it's kind of like a full breadth of everything you can do. We talk a little bit about what are your options, how do you make a decision between them, and then we build an agent throughout the day. And like Mark will start building it using Copilot Studio, and he'll get to a certain point with his. And then we flip over to me and I'm like, well, I'm going to show you how to do it using the Agents Toolkit. And we compare and contrast the two different options and what you get in one, what you get in the other one, what the developer experience or the end user experience is in each one, limitations with each one, advantages to each one, disadvantages. We go through all of that. So like Mark builds his agent to get to like this far, and then I come in and I build it to go like this far, and then I go a little bit farther, and then Mark goes like this, and then I go like this. And it's very much just you get a very good idea of which tool should I use based on the kind of thing I'm trying to solve, the kind of agent I'm trying to create, who my users are, the size of my organization, how do I want to publish it, who's building it, what tools am I most comfortable with, what's my background. There's so many different questions that come up from this. So we go through a lot of that stuff. That's what this workshop is all about. When I say workshop, it's more like a seminar. You sit back and you watch us, but we give you everything to do the same thing we're doing. We don't do it all together so that we can show a lot more stuff. All right. I'm also doing 2 breakout sessions at that conference. I'm doing a breakout session, like a breakout version of this, like a 1-hour talk or a 50-minute talk, whatever they do at ECS, which is basically we don't do any demos with this. It's more of a compressed down, like just talk track of this same concept of how do I choose between the two options, right? We did the same one at European SharePoint conference in December. It was one of the highest rated sessions, which was really cool. And then the other session that I'm doing is the SharePoint Framework 1.22 build system. So Gulp is out, Heft is in. What does that mean? How is it going to impact my projects? And then what are all the different extensibility options that I have? And how do I do it with the Heft based tool chain? So everything we used to do with Gulp or Webpack, I show you how to do the exact same stuff. And frankly, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more, we have a lot more control over it as well. So those are the 3 things that I'm doing at ECS Savvy. All right, so let me go. All right, let me go back. Let me go over a question I got posted over here inside Voitanos Learn. All of those people, for those of you who are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube Live or LinkedIn Live, the people who are my current customers, they get the priority of questions posted in Voitanos Learn to get those addressed. So let me go through one of those. So Donna said, this might be out of scope for these office hour topics, but I thought I'd ask. Why not? Let's see. I'm setting up an art of the possible type educational demo for some folks to showcase SharePoint and the benefits thereof. I have my typical one that I tend to do, but I thought I would ask if you had any ideas of what a demo like that should or might include in today's SharePoint landscape, focusing on collaboration like co-authoring, version control, metadata, check-in, check-out, sensitivity labels, etc., security, the high-level benefits of DLP, encryption, sample integrations, Power Platform, BI and apps, Outlook, Copilot, etc. Just wondering if you had some fresh ideas. I was thinking of adding an SPFx web part and generally freshening it up. So I would say in terms of this, like the things, now I'm going to come at it from the developer's point of view. So what I would do, and if this is just for SharePoint, I would do a web part as a single page, as just both a web part, just the standard like little box that's going to go on the page somewhere. And then I'll also do a web part as a single page app. So where it takes over the majority of the page. So people can see, how do I build like a full-blown web app that's going to run inside of SharePoint? And essentially it's just a web part. It just takes up the entire page except for the left-hand navigation and the header across the top. And the rest of the page is just one big canvas, no content on it. It's just my web part taking up all of that stuff. I would show that. I would also show extensions and how you can add basically scripts to any page using an application customizer. You're going to learn about that tomorrow, Donna. How you can also customize the menu options or buttons you have, both in the toolbar and in the drop-down context menu on lists and libraries. Those are command sets. That's, again, we'll do that in my workshop. I can't remember if we do that on Wednesday or Thursday. I think that's a Wednesday thing. I'll show you how. I would suggest you also do something with like field customizers. So how can I customize like how a cell is rendered in the grid view of a list? We'll cover that on Wednesday. And also how you can create custom forms without using Power Apps and instead using the SharePoint Framework, which there's a lot of advantages to why you would do the SharePoint Framework instead of Power Apps. So the quick one is, I've got a list that I use on 15 different sites. If I want to go make a custom form for that list, I'm going to have to go make that form 15 different times if I'm using Power Apps. If I'm using the SharePoint Framework, I make it once, I deploy it, and I can hook it up to the list without having to redeploy it. And it's just one code base. So if there's a bug, I only go one place to fix it, and it fixes it on all of them. We'll do that on Thursday's workshop. Okay, cool. So those are some of the things I would do with that. The other ones that I would do, if I'm thinking like bigger picture around Microsoft 365, this is the big topic that my next workshop is going to be on in February, is building apps for Microsoft Teams. Most people think that when you build stuff for Teams, it's a bot or an agent. Building apps for Teams allows you to either build like a personal app, which can be pinned in that left-hand rail and have tabs going across the top, or you can create your own custom tabs that go into channel or group chat that have a configuration associated with them. To me, I think that this is a better option than SharePoint in a lot of ways, because if your organization has adopted Teams, then this is the perfect place to build your app and host this is a perfect opportunity to build your app as a standard web app using all the different web dev techniques that you have, and deploy it and install it inside of Teams. And that's already going to be where most of your users are already spending a lot of time in their day. So your app is going to be very accessible to all of your users then. So I really like that as an option for enterprise apps, which is why I'm doing a workshop on it. Most people aren't even familiar with that, so that's why I like to do that one. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas, Donna. Let's look here. Let me go back to I don't see anything else in Voitanos Learn. Oh, hold on, let's see. Wait, it said that there was a question and it looks like it just disappeared. I know someone just deleted their question. All right, so let me jump back over to, we got about 5 minutes left. Let me jump over to, back over to the, let's see where we have here. So with LinkedIn, Casper said, come to think of it, content security policy might also cause issues for the PnP Modern Search project. So I might be busy February and March. Casper, if that project uses external libraries and it like externalizes them, so in the config file, in the config.json in your config folder, if you have anything in the externals, Yep. I would bet you money it's gonna impact those, because those aren't going to be whitelisted or allow listed, whatever, however you're supposed to say it. Or if you're dynamically loading stuff, then yeah, that could affect it. Oh, Sabby has another question here. Sabby said, if we create a custom engine agent, then we necessarily have to create a custom LLM orchestrator, or can we use one of the Microsoft ones? Sorry if the question is not precise. Yeah, so think about it like this. So you have two ways. I got a great article on this too. I think it's a great article. Sorry, I shouldn't have just said I have a great article. Free resources. All right, where is this? This was back in, no. This guy right here. So I have an article on this, extending M365 Copilot declarative agent option to Copilot Studio. So if you go in here, I have a picture. Picture right here. All right. So custom engine agent is going like all the way over here on the right-hand side. All right. So I have one way I can create an agent is by extending M365 Copilot. So I'm using Microsoft 365's tech stack that they've used to implement Copilot. So the user experience, the semantic index. They built an orchestrator. I have multiple orchestrators actually. It's an issue. And then they've also set up a language model. And for one license or paying on a consumption model by like messages or credits, I can use it as much as I like and use their existing infrastructure. But if I want to have more control, like I don't like something they've given me, or I don't like for example, if I wanted to build an agent that was going to work inside M365 Copilot, but I wanted to use the Opus model from Anthropic or Sonnet, or what if I didn't want to use the orchestrator and everything that Microsoft has to offer, and I want to build it using the agent platform that Anthropic has for Claude, using their SDK. Or maybe I want to have an agent that's going to I'm going to create, and it's going to be hosted using the AWS Bedrock platform or Google Vertex, which is where you could do something using the models that like Gemini uses and their orchestrator. Regardless of if I want to do something else and I don't want to use the Copilot stack, I would then choose this last option, which is a custom engine agent, which means I'm writing all the code to implement my chatbot. But in addition to that, I have to build and maintain and pay for my entire AI stack, which means that, yes, to your question, my agent will still work in M365 Copilot, but only the end user experience part. So instead of Copilot, instead of my chatbot, like me talking to Copilot, which is using my agent that I've created as a declarative agent or with Copilot Studio, instead it's going to my code, which I then would have to create my own. I'd have to implement my own orchestrator. I'd have to implement my own. I'd have to go through and stand up the model or models, deployments of those models that I want to use. I'd pay for those models as well. I'd have to determine which orchestrator I want to use or build my own. So you've got options like I have a couple of them listed here, or my slide. So like that's semantic kernel, that's LangChain. You can decide what AI services you want to take advantage of. Like this is the agent service from Microsoft Foundry. This is the Azure AI search resource for where you'd create like a vector database for doing Azure-based search, kind of like building your own semantic kernel. So yeah, you basically say that if I don't want to use the Microsoft 365 stack and the ways I can build my own agents by extending that stack, that's what Copilot Studio and Agent Builder and the Agents Toolkit, declarative agents are all about. And if instead I build a custom engine agent, which is what we call these kind of agents, then I have to do everything. The only thing that's given to me is the user experience, but I got to do everything else. I have to build everything else myself. All right. So yes, you would have to go through and build everything else yourself. Now there's advantages to that. There's disadvantages. The advantages, I have full control over my entire experience of how everything's going to work. And no one needs a license to be able to use it because it will work in Copilot, but I'm not using any of Microsoft's infrastructure or any of Microsoft 365's infrastructure. So I don't have to pay a Copilot $30 per user per month license. I don't have to pay for a credit pack or pay per credit in the consumption model because I'm responsible for paying for the compute that's going to host my orchestrator. I'm paying for any resources I'm using in the different platforms like Microsoft Foundry or AWS Bedrock or Google Vertex or any of the other AI services I'm using on any of those different platforms or the hosting and deployment of a model. I got to pay for all of that. But yeah, I'm responsible for maintaining the whole thing. One may give you more, one of them gives you a lot more control, but you have a lot more responsibility and you got to do everything. There's no like, I want to kind of do some or the other. There is some stuff that like I could use the semantic index that we have in M365 from this over here using the Microsoft Graph APIs that like some of the Copilot APIs that are being exposed as part of through Microsoft Graph, including the retrieval API, which is the same thing that the orchestrator for the declarative agents uses. Sorry, the orchestrator that the Copilot Studio based agents use to get access to semantic kernel, they use the retrieval API. So that for that to work, the users that are using your agent, they do have to have a Copilot license. So a bit of a mix there. You also, if you take a look at, I have a webinar that I did on this recently where I kind of talked about this, is this guy right here, evaluating your M365 Copilot agent options that I did back in December. Oh, sorry, I forgot the build one was actually earlier this month. But this one is this webinar. You can watch the recording of that where I talk about the different options you have, but this focuses more on that first part of extending M365 Copilot, not so much going all the way to the custom engine agent one. All right, I see we're over time, but I got one or two little questions here really quick. So I'm not, if you no more questions, because I'll answer these real quick and then I'll move on. Or then we'll go and wrap it up. I see, let's see, Casper Structured Nav V2. Yep, we'll see. And Alex said, have I had a chance of using LiveShare SDK in your team's workshops? I don't use, so I have used it. I've played with it. I don't teach it because I don't teach how to use it in the workshops because I find the number of people who want to build an app with that scenario in mind is very focused. And frankly, when I teach one of my workshops, my team's courses, I find that most people are not interested in building that. And so it like takes away from the stuff that I could teach that a lot of people want to know about. And plus it's really hard to find, it's harder to go through and to find the people that are interested in using LiveShare to build a workshop on that. So have I used it? Yes. Do I teach it? No, I don't teach it. Not at least not right now. It's just too narrow too narrow of a niche or a focus for people that it's just not feasible for me to build a course on it right now or to teach it. So fair question. I just haven't done it yet. Last question then. So Donna says, what is my preferred tool for managing administration of SharePoint Online, like ShareGate, or et cetera? She said her knowledge on what's out there today is dated. So to be honest, I don't have a preferred tool because I don't do this. I focus exclusively on development stuff. So I do not do any management of SharePoint Online. I do not do any migrations or any end user stuff. So what I will tell you is that if a company asked me what product should I look at, if you are looking for like a migration tool, or you're looking for like just a management to help with your like the governance of SharePoint Online or really of Microsoft 365, I'm probably leaving some people out, but I think that the three that you have to look at are ShareGate, Orchestry, and AvePoint. And like there's probably more. And so don't say like, oh, Andrew didn't say it, so I'm not going to look at them. This is not my wheelhouse. So, but I do like ShareGate's been around for a very long time and they're very, very good. Orchestry has not been around as long as ShareGate, but they like people love their stuff and it's a great company. The people are fantastic over at Orchestry and they're really easy. They're really easy to work with and they're like a lot of people love their stuff. AvePoint's been at this a long time and they got a huge product suite. And they're always seen as like one of the big guys. So I think you have to look at all three of those and then honestly go to Google and say like, I'm considering these three companies to help me with X. Who else plays in this space? I mean, you go to any of these like SharePoint conferences or M365 conferences, walk through the expo, and it's like you see somebody else, somebody new each time I walk through it. So it's one of the things I like to do early on in the week. It's just kind of like, let me walk through the expo and not talk to anybody, but let me just kind of walk through just to kind of see who's there, just to see what new companies are showing up and what do they do. So, all right, I've gone 6 minutes over. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up today. I do want to, where are my slides? I do want to make sure I call out that the next office hours is also at an altered time because I'll be teaching my team's workshop during the third week of the month. So our next office hours is going to be on February the 24th of 2026. Same time, same setup, etc. Probably have a lot more news at that time. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And if you got any questions, feel free to post them in the comments from this office hours or hit me up and I'm happy to go through and address them. All right. Take care, everybody.